They walked into the courtroom hand in hand. Two young black girls, no older than 16, their eyes burning with quiet determination. Across from them sat Judge Raymond Collins, an old man with a reputation. A man who had made it clear, time and time again, where he stood on cases like this. The courtroom was silent, the air thick with tension. The girl's mother sat in the back row, gripping the edge of her seat, fear and hope battling inside her. Reporters lined the room, their cameras ready to capture whatever happened next. No one expected what these twin sisters were about to do. No one expected them to change everything. But as soon as they opened their mouths, the entire courtroom fell still. What they said? It left the judge speechless. And what happened next was beyond anything anyone could have imagined. The wooden doors of the courtroom creaked as the twin girls stepped inside. Their hands were locked together, a silent pact between them. The air smelled of polished oak and legal power, a space where justice was supposed to prevail. But today, that concept felt distant. Today, they weren't just walking into a courtroom, they were walking into a battle. Maya and Leah Carter were only 16, but their eyes held the weight of something far beyond their years. Their dark brown curls framed their determined faces, and their matching blue blazers, borrowed from their mother's closet, were just a bit too big. They were here for their older brother, Jamal, and they were here to face the man who had already decided his fate before even hearing the case. Judge Raymond Collins sat at the front of the room, his expression unreadable. A man in his 60s, his face was lined with years of authority, his silver hair combed back with precision. He was known for his harsh sentencing, especially when it came to young black men. And now he had Jamal's future in his hands. Their mother, Vanessa Carter, sat in the back row, gripping the fabric of her dress like it was the only thing keeping her together. Her son was facing 10 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. There was no evidence, no witness testimony, just a system that had never been built for people like them. Maya and Leah knew this wasn't a fair fight, but they had one thing no one in that room expected: their voices. The defense attorney cleared his throat. "Your Honor, the sisters of the accused have requested permission to speak before sentencing." Judge Collins exhaled sharply, tapping his gavel against the wood. "This is highly irregular." His voice was heavy with irritation, like the mere thought of listening to them was a waste of his time. Maya took a step forward. "Please, Your Honor," she said, her voice steady. "Just give us a few minutes." For a moment, the judge said nothing. The room was so quiet that Maya could hear the rhythmic ticking of the clock behind him. Then, with an annoyed sigh, he waved a dismissive hand. 2 minutes, that's all." Leah stepped up beside her sister. She could feel the weight of 100 eyes on them. Reporters, attorneys, strangers who didn't even know their names but had already decided what kind of people they were. She looked directly at Judge Collins. "You see our brother as just another case, another statistic, another young black man who must be guilty because that's the easier assumption." Her voice didn't waver, even as her heart pounded. "But he is not a statistic. He is our brother. And he is innocent." Judge Collins's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. Maya continued. "We have sat through this trial and watched as evidence was ignored. We have watched as you refused to acknowledge the truth. You say this courtroom stands for justice. But justice is blind, Your Honor. We just didn't expect it to be deaf, too." A murmur spread through the courtroom. Even some of the reporters lifted their heads, intrigued. Judge Collins's fingers curled around his gavel. "That's enough," he said, but his voice had lost some of its sharpness. Leah took one more step forward, refusing to back down. "No, it's not," she said. "Not until you open your eyes and see us for who we are." The room fell into a tense silence. Then, something happened that no one could have predicted. Judge Collins hesitated. Just for a second, his mask of authority cracked. And in that tiny moment, the girls knew. Something had shifted. Judge Collins leaned back in his chair, his fingers tightening around the gavel like it was his lifeline. For years, he had presided over countless cases, each one blending into the next. He had heard every plea, every argument. But this was different. These girls weren't pleading for mercy. They were demanding to be heard. The courtroom was still, the tension hanging like a storm cloud. Maya's voice broke the silence. "Your Honor, do you know what it's like to see someone you love labeled as a criminal before anyone even hears the truth? Do you know what it feels like to watch the system crush someone just because of the color of their skin?" Leah stepped in, her voice steady and deliberate. "Jamal was on his way to pick us up from school the night he was arrested. He wasn't near the robbery. He wasn't part of anything illegal. But that didn't matter, did it? Because all it took was one assumption, one officer. And suddenly his entire life is on the line." The judge tapped his gavel lightly against the bench, a warning. "You're walking a fine line here, young lady." But Leah didn't flinch. "And so are you," she shot back. "Because you're about to send an innocent man to prison. You're about to destroy not just his life, but ours too. Do you think this ends with Jamal? It doesn't. It's a cycle, and you have the power to stop it right now." The reporters in the back scribbled furiously, their pens flying across notepads. The audience sat frozen, as if afraid to even breathe. Vanessa, their mother, covered her mouth with trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. She had never been prouder and never more terrified. Judge Collins cleared his throat, his expression hardening. "I've seen cases like this before. Young men who claim innocence but have a history of poor choices. I've learned not to take their word for it." Maya's eyes narrowed, her voice rising with a mix of frustration and resolve. "You've learned not to listen, that's the problem. You sit there on that bench looking down at people like us, and you assume you know our story. But you don't." Leah stepped closer, her voice breaking slightly. "You don't know what it's like to grow up being told you have to be twice as good just to be seen as enough. To be told to keep your head down, to stay out of trouble because one wrong move could ruin everything. Jamal stayed out of trouble. He worked hard. And still, he's here. Do you really think that's fair?" The judge hesitated again, his composure cracking under the weight of their words. The room seemed to lean forward, everyone waiting for what would happen next. "Enough," Judge Collins said finally, his voice softer this time. "This isn't a debate. This is a courtroom." Leah's voice dropped, quiet but piercing. "Exactly. A courtroom. Where truth is supposed to matter. Where justice is supposed to be blind. But today, it feels like justice has its eyes wide open, and it's only looking at the color of our skin." A ripple of murmurs swept through the audience. Even the stenographer paused, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Maya took a deep breath, her voice filled with raw emotion. "Your Honor, we are not asking for a favor. We are not asking for pity. We are asking for fairness. For our brother to be seen as a person, not a stereotype." For a moment, Judge Collins didn't move. His gaze flickered from the twins to their mother, then to Jamal, who sat silently at the defense table, his hands clenched into fists. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the room. Finally, the judge spoke, his tone measured. "This court will take a brief recess." The gavel came down with a sharp crack, and the courtroom erupted into whispers. As the twins walked back to their mother, their hands still clasped together, Vanessa pulled them into a tight embrace. "You girls, you were incredible," she whispered, her voice choked with tears. Maya and Leah exchanged a look. They had done what they came to do, plant a seed of doubt in the judge's mind, but what would happen next? That was a question no one could answer. The courtroom doors swung shut behind Judge Collins as he disappeared into his chambers. The murmurs in the room grew louder, a wave of speculation rolling through the spectators. Some whispered about the twins' bravery, others about the possibility of a mistrial, but one thing was clear: no one had expected this. Maya and Leah sat beside their mother, their hands still trembling from the adrenaline. Jamal, their older brother, remained silent, staring at the table in front of him. He had spent months trapped in a system designed to break him, and now, for the first time, he saw a crack in its armor. "Do you think he listened?" Maya whispered, her voice barely above a breath. Leah swallowed hard. "I don't know, but we made him think. That's more than most people ever get." Their mother, Vanessa, reached over and took their hands in hers. Her eyes were red, but there was a fire in them now. "No matter what happens, you both did something powerful today," she said. "You stood up, you spoke truth, that means something." But truth alone wasn't always enough, and they all knew it. Across the room, the prosecution sat stiffly, their lead attorney flipping through case files with a look of frustration. They had built their argument on a foundation of assumptions, and those assumptions had just been publicly challenged. After what felt like an eternity, the bailiff's voice rang through the courtroom. "All rise." The doors opened again, and Judge Collins returned to his seat, his face unreadable. The room fell into an eerie silence. He adjusted his glasses, looked down at his notes, and exhaled. "I have taken a brief recess to reflect on this case," he began. His voice was even, but something had changed in his tone. "This court does not operate on emotions but on facts, and while passion is admirable, it does not change the law." Maya's stomach dropped. Here it comes, she thought. The same speech, the same verdict. But then the judge did something unexpected. He hesitated. He removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose as if the weight of his own words was pressing on him. "However," he continued, "it is the responsibility of this court to ensure that all individuals, regardless of background, are treated with fairness and dignity. And in reviewing the evidence presented in this case, I find myself with significant doubts." A gasp rippled through the room. Leah's heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her ears. Was this actually happening? The judge turned to the prosecution. "The evidence against the defendant is circumstantial at best. The testimonies provided lack credibility, and the inconsistencies in the arrest report are troubling." His gaze flickered toward the lead prosecutor. "This court cannot in good conscience move forward with sentencing based on such weak foundations." Maya felt a lump rise in her throat. Was he saying what she thought he was saying? Judge Collins took a deep breath. "Therefore, I am overturning the verdict." The courtroom exploded into chaos. Gasps, shouts, the sound of reporters scrambling to get their microphones closer. The prosecution immediately objected, their voices rising in protest, but the judge raised his hand, silencing them. "This decision is final," he stated firmly. "The defendant is to be released immediately." Vanessa let out a sob, clutching her son as if she would never let go. Jamal, who had sat in quiet disbelief this entire time, finally let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Maya and Leah clung to each other, their hands shaking. They had done it. They had won. But just as relief began to wash over them, a cold voice cut through the air. "This isn't over," the prosecutor snapped. His eyes locked onto the twins. Maya and Leah exchanged a glance. Maybe the battle had been won. But the war, that was just beginning. The courtroom was still buzzing with energy, the echoes of Judge Collins' verdict still ringing in everyone's ears. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted over each other, and the prosecution team huddled, already preparing their next move. Jamal stood frozen, his chest rising and falling as if he was trying to convince himself this was real. Vanessa clung to him, sobbing into his shoulder, while Maya and Leah remained locked in disbelief. "You're free," Leah whispered, her voice cracking. Jamal blinked, then let out a breathless laugh, one that carried years of pain, anger, and exhaustion. "I'm free." But even in that moment of relief, something felt off. The prosecutor's words hung in the air like a storm cloud. "This isn't over." The bailiff stepped forward, unlocking Jamal's handcuffs. The metal clinked against the table, a sound that should have symbolized freedom, but to Maya and Leah it felt like a warning. The moment they stepped outside the courthouse, a wall of flashing lights and microphones nearly blinded them. The press had gathered in full force, hungry for a headline. "Ms. Carter, how does it feel knowing your daughters changed the judge's mind?" "Maya, Leah, did you plan this speech in advance?" "Jamal, what's your next move?" Vanessa tightened her grip on Jamal's arm, guiding him through the crowd, but there was no escape. Every step felt like walking through quicksand, the weight of public scrutiny pressing down on them. Then a reporter with a sharp voice and even sharper eyes stepped forward. "Judge Collins has never overturned a verdict before. Some are saying he was pressured into this decision because of the public spectacle. What do you say to that?" Maya felt a chill run down her spine. She turned, locking eyes with the woman. "Pressured?" she repeated, incredulous. "We didn't pressure him. We made him see the truth." The reporter didn't back down. "Some legal analysts believe the prosecution might appeal this ruling. Are you afraid this isn't over?" Leah felt Jamal stiffen beside her. He had barely taken his first breath of freedom, and already people were talking about taking it away. "We're not afraid," Leah said firmly, her voice unwavering, "because the truth doesn't change just because people don't like it." But as they finally broke through the crowd and reached their car, she wasn't so sure, because deep down she knew people didn't like it when the system was challenged, and people like Judge Collins didn't change overnight. 2 days later, the headlines were everywhere. Judge overturns guilty verdict after emotional courtroom speech. Twin sisters call out. Racial bias in court sparks national debate. Was justice served? Experts weigh in on controversial ruling. Maya scrolled through the news on her phone, her stomach twisting. Some people called them heroes. Others called them troublemakers. And then there were the comments. Of course they played the race card. This is why the system is broken. Watch how fast this innocent guy ends up in trouble again. Maya shut off her phone, her hands shaking. She looked over at Leah, who was sitting on their bedroom floor, cross-legged, staring at her laptop screen. "They're trying to spin it," Leah muttered. "They're saying Collins was weak, that he caved to pressure." Maya swallowed hard. If they challenge the ruling... Leah didn't let her finish. "Then we fight again." A knock at the door made them both jump. Their mother peeked in, her face drawn and tired. "Girls," she said, her voice soft but urgent, "come downstairs." Something in her tone sent a shiver down Maya's spine. When they reached the living room, Jamal was standing in front of the TV, his arms crossed. The news anchor's voice filled the room. In breaking news, Sources confirm that Judge Raymond Collins has received multiple threats following his decision to overturn Jamal Carter's conviction. The judge has reportedly requested additional security, and some legal analysts speculate that he may reconsider his ruling under pressure. Leah's stomach dropped. Maya felt the room spin. Judge Collins was in trouble, and if he gave in to the pressure, Jamal could be sent back to prison. Again, Maya's breath caught in her throat. She turned to Jamal, searching his face for some kind of reassurance, but he looked just as shaken as she was. Leah clenched her fists, her mind racing. "This can't be happening," Vanessa murmured, sinking onto the couch. "They're threatening him for doing the right thing." Jamal exhaled sharply, running a hand over his face. "They want to make an example out of him, and out of me." His voice was steady, but the underlying fear was unmistakable. Leah grabbed the remote and turned up the volume. Some political figures are calling for Judge Collins to step down, claiming his ruling undermines the integrity of the justice system. Meanwhile, activists argue that his decision was one of the few instances where the system actually worked as it should. A panel of commentators appeared on the screen, debating as if Jamal's life were just another talking point. "This ruling sets a dangerous precedent," one man said, shaking his head. "It opens the door for emotional appeals to override the law." "Or," a woman countered, "it finally exposes how flawed the system is. If two teenage girls can poke holes in a case this easily, maybe the real problem isn't them, it's the system itself." Maya felt her heart pound. She knew this wasn't just about her family anymore. This was bigger, and it was getting dangerous. Vanessa turned to her son. "Jamal, you need to lay low for a while. No interviews, no statements, nothing. We can't give them any reason to twist this against you." Jamal let out a humorless laugh. "Mom, it doesn't matter what I do. They already decided who I am before I even walked into that courtroom." Maya and Leah exchanged a look. They had won the case, but the fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. The next morning, a loud knock at the door jolted everyone awake. Maya sat up in bed, her heart hammering. "Who the hell is that?" Leah was already moving, peeking out the window. Her face went pale. Reporters, and a lot of them. Downstairs, Vanessa was already at the door, her robe hastily wrapped around her. Jamal stood beside her, his jaw tight. "Mama, don't open it," Maya warned as they reached the stairs. But it was too late. The second Vanessa cracked the door open, the shouting began. "Mrs. Carter, how do you feel about the threats against Judge Collins? Maya, Leah, did you plan your speech ahead of time? Jamal, do you think your case will be overturned again? Some sources claim you were involved in gang activity. Any comment?" Jamal flinched like he had been struck. "That's a damn lie," he muttered under his breath. Vanessa tried to push the door shut, but one reporter shoved a microphone forward. "How does it feel knowing this judge risked his career for your family? Do you think he regrets it?" Maya snapped. She pushed past her mother and faced the crowd head-on. "Do you hear yourselves?" she demanded. "A judge finally does the right thing, and instead of asking why the system is broken in the first place, you're acting like he's the problem." The reporters momentarily faltered. Leah stepped up beside her. "Our brother is innocent," she said, her voice strong. "We had to fight for a basic right, fairness, and now you want to act like we stole something?" More cameras flashed. More murmurs spread through the crowd. Then another voice called out, one that sent a chill down Maya's spine. "Justice isn't decided by teenage girls." Maya turned sharply. A man stood apart from the reporters, arms crossed. He wasn't holding a microphone or camera. His suit was crisp, his stance rigid. A lawyer, and not just any lawyer. The prosecutor, Robert Gaines. "Enjoy your moment," he said, his voice calm but laced with something cold. "Because it won't last. The appeal is already in motion." Maya's stomach twisted. Jamal stepped forward. "You really want to lock up an innocent man just to protect your win record?" Gaines barely blinked. "This was never about winning or losing. It's about the law, and emotions don't change the law." Leah crossed her arms. "Neither does racism. But that didn't stop you." Gaines gave a slight smirk. "We'll see you back in court." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving behind a silence heavier than any gavel strike. Maya felt her hands shaking. They're really trying to undo everything. Jamal exhaled, his shoulders tense. "And if they win?" Vanessa swallowed hard. "You go back to prison." The weight of those words pressed down on them like an avalanche. They had won a battle. But the war had just begun. The air in the Carter household was thick with tension. The victory that had once felt so overwhelming now seemed fragile, like a candle flickering in a storm. They had barely begun to process Jamal's release, and now the legal system was already clawing to take him back. Maya sat on the couch, her arms wrapped around her knees, while Leah paced back and forth, her fists clenched at her sides. Their mother, Vanessa, stood by the window, peeking through the blinds every few minutes as if expecting another wave of reporters or something worse. Jamal sat in the corner, silent, his eyes unfocused. "They won't stop," he finally muttered. Maya looked up. "What do you mean?" Jamal leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Gaines, the system, the people who want to see me behind bars." He exhaled slowly. "This isn't just about my case anymore. This is about power. And people like Gaines hate losing power." Leah stopped pacing. "Then we don't let them win." Vanessa turned from the window, worry etched into her face. "Leah, this isn't just some school debate. This is real. They're coming after us, after Jamal, and they have the resources to do it." "So do we," Maya said suddenly. Everyone turned to her. Leah narrowed her eyes. "What are you thinking?" Maya grabbed her phone. "The media is already involved. They're watching this case, talking about it. That means we have something just as powerful as their legal system." Leah's eyes lit up in realization. "Public pressure." Maya nodded. "They want to use the system against us? Fine, but we can use something they don't control." Jamal frowned. "You're talking about social media?" "Yes," Maya said, "but not just social media. We need voices, people who are willing to stand with us, to make sure Gaines and his people know that if they try to push this appeal, the world will be watching." Vanessa's lips pressed together. "Maya, that's dangerous. The more attention we bring to this, the more backlash we might face." Maya met her mother's gaze, unwavering. "We've already got backlash, but if we stay silent, we're giving them exactly what they want." Jamal rubbed his face. "I don't know." Leah sat beside him. "Jamal, listen. They arrested you without evidence. They put you on trial without proof. They were about to lock you away for a decade, and if we hadn't spoken up, they would have gotten away with it. They're trying to do it again. Are we really going to just sit back and let them?" Jamal stared at his sister, his jaw tightening. Then, slowly, he nodded. "I won't go down without a fight," he said. Maya felt a spark of determination flare in her chest. "Then we start now." The hashtag that changed everything. It started with a single post. Maya, Leah, and Jamal sat together in their living room, drafting a message that told the truth. It was raw, it was honest, and it was undeniable. Maya hit post. "They tried to silence us. They tried to lock away an innocent man. Now they want to undo justice because it didn't serve their agenda. We won't be quiet. We won't stop fighting. Justice for Jamal. Within minutes, it was shared, then 100 times, then 1,000. By the next morning, it was trending nationwide. Celebrities, activists, and everyday people began chiming in, demanding answers. News outlets started running segments on the case, questioning the legitimacy of the appeal. A petition began circulating, calling for the district attorney's office to drop the appeal entirely. And then something unexpected happened. A statement was released. Not from the prosecution, from Judge Collins. The judge's dilemma. The news alert popped up on Maya's phone just as they were eating breakfast. She nearly choked on her cereal as she clicked the link. Statement from Judge Collins regarding Carter case. Vanessa turned up the TV as a reporter read his words aloud. In my years on the bench, I have presided over hundreds of cases. I have always made my rulings based on the law as I understand it. However, the reaction to my decision in the Carter case has been unlike anything I have experienced before. It has forced me to re-examine not just this case, but the very system I am a part of. I will not be intimidated by threats, nor will I be pressured to undo a ruling simply because it is controversial. Justice must stand on truth, not politics. I will not be reversing my decision. Maya felt her whole body tense. Leah's mouth dropped open. Is he actually standing by it? Jamal's eyes widened. I don't believe it. Vanessa covered her mouth with her hands. Oh my God. On the screen, the reporter continued. While Judge Collins' statement does not guarantee that the prosecution won't pursue an appeal, it makes it clear that any effort to overturn the ruling will not have the judge's cooperation. The district attorney's office has yet to release their own response, but sources suggest that growing public pressure is making it difficult for them to move forward with the appeal. Leah nearly jumped out of her chair. We did it. We actually did it. Maya wasn't celebrating just yet. Not yet, she said, but we might have just turned the tide. Later, that evening, a call came through just as the sun was setting. Vanessa answered, listening intently before her eyes flicked to her children. It's our lawyer, she said, putting the phone on speaker. The voice on the other end was calm but urgent. The prosecution is backing down, he said. They're not moving forward with the appeal. The room fell silent. Jamal exhaled, his shoulders shaking. Leah clutched Maya's hand. Vanessa let out a small, disbelieving laugh. It was over, truly, finally, over. Maya looked at her family, the people she had fought for, the people she had risked everything for. She thought back to that moment in the courtroom, when she and Leah had first stepped forward to speak, when they had chosen to fight. And for the first time in what felt like forever, justice had won. The air in the Carter household felt different, lighter. For the first time in months, there was no fear hanging over their heads, no uncertainty about what tomorrow would bring. Jamal was free, and now no one could take that away. Vanessa sat at the kitchen table, staring at the official email their lawyer had forwarded. Appeal withdrawn. Just 2 words, but they carried the weight of an entire battle fought and won. She exhaled deeply, a quiet prayer of relief escaping her lips. Across from her, Jamal scrolled through his phone. Messages flooded in. Old friends, strangers, even people he hadn't spoken to in years. Some congratulated him, others apologized for doubting him. But the one that caught his attention the most was from an unknown number. Unknown. You don't know me, but I followed your case. My brother's in prison for something he didn't do. Seeing your story gives me hope. Thank you. Jamal swallowed hard. He had spent so long fighting to survive that he hadn't thought about what came next. But now, there were people looking to him. People who saw him as more than just a victim. People who saw him as proof that fighting back could actually change something. He turned to Maya and Leah, who sat beside him, watching him carefully. "We didn't just fight for me," he said. "We fought for every person who's ever been in my position." Maya smiled. "And we won." Leah smirked. "For now?" Jamal let out a quiet laugh. "Yeah, for now." But they all knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. 1 week later, the Carter family sat side by side on the couch, staring at the camera in front of them. Their social media pages had exploded with followers, their inboxes overflowing with people sharing their own stories. Some had faced wrongful convictions. Others had experienced discrimination in ways they had never spoken about before. People were watching, listening. And now, it was time to speak again. Maya adjusted the camera. "Okay," she whispered before hitting record. Leah cleared her throat, looking directly into the lens. "We started this fight because we had no choice. Our brother was facing prison for something he didn't do. The system was ready to erase him, to take away his future, and we refused to let that happen." Maya nodded. "But what we've learned is that this wasn't just about Jamal. It was about all the people who never got the chance to speak, the ones who didn't have a voice, the ones who were ignored." Jamal leaned forward. "I got lucky," he said. "But luck shouldn't decide who gets justice. The system shouldn't be stacked against us from the moment we're born, and we won't stop fighting until it isn't." Vanessa smiled at her children, pride shining in her eyes. Leah took a deep breath. "If you've ever felt unheard, if you've ever been told that your story doesn't matter, know that it does. And we want to hear it." Maya glanced at her sister, then back at the camera. "This isn't the end. It's just the beginning. So if you believe in justice, if you believe in fairness, if you believe that truth should matter," she looked directly into the lens, "join us. Stories like this aren't just fiction. They happen every day. People are silenced. Truth is ignored. Justice is denied. But it doesn't have to stay that way. If this story moved you, if it made you think, do something about it. Share this video, speak up, support those who are fighting for justice. And most importantly, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. Because stories like this need to be told,